This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and I am flying solo today. Jim is in the middle of a cross-country move, and he gave it his best attempt. He dialed in from a coffee shop, and it looked like a big background. And I was like, dude, you look like you're in a hostage video, and it's very noisy. So I'm like, I'll just take it today. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring in, I guess, technically my co-host for today, Joni Brennan. She is the chair of the board of directors for IDPro. So welcome back to the show, Joni.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so honorary co-host for us. And this is something that we hope to be doing with IDPro a little more frequently now that we are the official podcast for IDPro, which we kind of announced that a couple months ago. And then Jim and I got busy with between going to Europe and Vegas for conferences. And I was telling you before I hit record, this is the first episode of the podcast that I've actually sat down and recorded in like 2 months. So, we'll make sure the rust isn't there, but welcome back. You were with us for episode 290, which was about a year ago in June, I want to say 2024, for those listening in the far future. You were coming to us then from a trailer in Starlink. Has anything changed?
Still in the trailer, still on Starlink. We're looking good. Hopefully we're looking good and sounding good. So yeah, still working off the side of the mountain, and just thrilled to be a co-host today. I didn't put that all together. So 290 co-host day. Like, wow, this is exciting. I'm super excited.
Well, it's obviously the most significant achievement probably in your career. So welcome to the big time. Now I'm just so I guess, let's kind of dive into that, because you're coming in as the new chair for IDPro. I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts. I'm a member of IDPro, and I definitely encourage people out there. It's the best community for identity people in the world, unbiased. I just think it is. But let's talk a little bit about sort of what you've been working on for the last year, because I know you wear a couple hats, and we'll probably talk a little bit about DIACC, which we'll get into that. And we'll talk about IDPro, but just give us an update. What's life been like? Have you left the trailer in the last year?
Yeah. So we do leave the trailer, to be clear. But at the same time, life has been exciting. I think we're grateful to be in the land that we are and the place that we are, and to have nature all around us. Dealing with all the ups and the downs of the world, economies, all the silly stuff that kind of happens from day to day, and dealing with that. And it certainly helps to kind of open the window and look out at trees and mountains. But yeah, we're splitting our time, just the majority in the city. But the joke that we have is that the trailer is actually slightly bigger than our city apartment, so it's kind of nice to be in at times. But it's been a good year. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, that's good. So you're in Canada, for those that are probably wondering. Where in Canada are you?
Yeah, I'm in Canada. I'm based in British Columbia, and I split my time between Vancouver and Whistler. So it's a great place to be. Lots of skiing, mountains, biking, and all those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I love to do this work out of Canada, and for the background for people as well. I'm a dual citizen, so I immigrated from New Jersey to Canada. So it's quite the transition, but we're figuring it out. We're making it work, just adding an extra O into all the words every chance I get. That's basically all you got to do.
Joni's gone global, folks, so we got to watch out for that one. So the last year or so, we've had a lot of action in the IDPro world, and so I guess let's start with IDPro. Like, okay. What's the thing that the membership who is hopefully listening to this should be aware of, within the last, let's say a few months or so, and sort of what you're expecting here as you take over the chairman?
Yeah, thanks for that. So first of all, it's important. I want to recognize and thank everyone, all of the board members and the leadership, the emeritus, the outgoing chair, and folks like Heather and the team, because everything is a village, right? And so many people and their contributions and efforts help to produce and support the community that we have in the IDPro to get it to where it is today. And now with the opportunity of being chair of the board, and working as a team with the entirety of the board and the officers, now we have an opportunity to look at what will be the next chapter. Yes, at the leadership on the board, where do we need to be focusing? And so we're working on that layer. And then also, anytime you have incoming leadership or change in leadership, it's always an opportunity to open the door for communications, because what I would really love, you could feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn, send me a note. I know there's a very active Slack as well. I admit I'm not the best. I'm a slacker on Slack, if that makes sense. So I try to do the Slack, but I'm not always up on the Slack. Send a carrier pigeon, a message in a bottle. Anyway, I would love to hear from the members of IDPro, and I'd love to hear from the members, what are the things that your time with IDPro, like what should IDPro continue doing? Like what's been working, what's been helping you? Are there things that we're doing that you think maybe we should stop doing those things? And then also, is there something that you think that we could be doing as an organization? So that's just an open invitation. Let's connect. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what your feedback is as we set the next chapter for where the members find the value and where the members think we should go next. I certainly have some thoughts on that. I'm very keen to hear what people think, directly.
Yeah, I'm sure people have opinions. So now is the time, right? I think it's just kind of like what I tell people when I come in from a consulting. It's like, I can't fix what I don't know about. So unless you're willing to share and, tell the doctor where it hurts, you're going to have a much better experience of, resolving the pains out there. And there's lots of ideas. I'm sure I have several. I might even pitch a few here as we're kind of talking along. But I would definitely encourage people to reach out. I think that's one of the great things about the IDPro community is that, yes, it is a very active Slack channel, and people are always willing to help out. But that should go both ways, right? It should be, hey, how do we make this organization as best as we can? Yeah. And so, great ideas come from all sources. Let's destroy Joni's inbox. Good ideas.
That assumes that it's not destroyed already. So let's add more destruction. Happy for that. Yeah, it sounds good.
So what do you see as sort of next? You mentioned you have some ideas, and you and I were kind of chatting, and I'm sure we'll get into it, kind of off air. We'll get it here on air probably here in a minute. But what are some of your thoughts as you come into the role? And I want to be able to ask maybe some harder questions. And we didn't prep for this. So it's kind of like putting you on the spot. But, what are the things that you think IDPro does really well? And what are the things that we need to get better at as a group? And I mean that in a spirit of love and communication, and let's make this thing better.
Totally, right? So we did not do a lot of, or even really any prep. But that's awesome, because we know the space, we're here to talk, and nobody claims to have all the answers. So that makes the conversation a lot easier to have. What I think, because what you think IDPro does well or doesn't could be very different than what I think it does well or not. What I think it does well, number one, I think it connects people. It connects people who are in this industry, whether they're just new coming into the industry, whether they've been in it for a while, or they're really senior level and they've been in the space for quite a while. It connects at all levels. People that are dedicated to identity and identity management as a profession. So I think that's really well done and happens at the conferences and through outreach like this and in LinkedIn. And I see it all over the place, and Slack, and I see it all over the place. Another thing that I think that IDPro does well is the capabilities survey each year. Where are we feeling? Where are our technical skills as a community? Taking the sentiment of the community for where we are in our aptitude and our learning and what our perceptions are. So I think that's a really valuable piece of work that's unique and I would expect should keep going. And then the other piece I think that IDPro does well is, of course, the CIDPro and having the certification program that's well founded and well built. And by the way, based on the BOC. So I think the BOC is definitely an asset that continues to grow and continues to grow over time. So those are just a small list of all the things that I think IDPro is doing really excellent at. Where do I think that IDPro could improve? I think that there's work to be done collectively. Listen, I've spent my career in nonprofit organizations and being a team member in nonprofit organizations, specifically on identity. So I've got 25 years in all of those roles around that space. So one of the things that I was looking for more in IDPro is like a little bit more structure. Like how do we get together and share information? What are those structures? How does it work? Should we have, even I am kind of looking around and just saying, okay, well, we've got, files over here, we've got Slack, and we've got this. And I'll tell you, some of this might be, some of my thoughts here might also, I also ponder quite often the kind of the two poles of models. If one's centralized and one's decentralized, like leaning too far into either of those has challenges and opportunities. And me personally, sometimes I feel like IDPro is really, really decentralized, and I'm looking for a little bit more centralization in the middle for what's the best way for us to engage. How do members, aside from going on a podcast and saying, hey, what do you think? What are the channels by which members could be raising opportunities and raising ideas? Because I truly believe that when we're all contributing together and we're all, this is our organization. And so we all have an opportunity to contribute to it, to shape it, and to continue to make it more valuable. So I think a little bit more structure is something that I'm kind of keen on so that the members have more opportunity. And then, the other piece of that as well is something I've been really trying, a problem space I've been trying to whittle away on in my day job and in my job as volunteer chair on the board is I get a sense that, when I take the skills survey every year or complete it, I'll give myself away. I'm one of those people, I think there's a question that says, do you feel like a professional yet? Or something like that at the end. And I'm always like, not yet, almost, maybe next year, so I'm always kind of looking for what's that space of improvement. And sometimes I wonder if there's, the word identity is a really, really big word. And I've in fact been in other forums sometimes making the case for not using the word identity for the work that we do, because sometimes I think it's either too wide or the person on the other end thinks it's something different than what we're trying to communicate. So we're not going to change that word necessarily, but I do think kind of underneath that is, what is an identity professional? In my own view, I think an identity professional is someone who is the software engineer. I also think it's the person who's got the policy advocacy and understands the policy and governance landscape. I think it's the person who does the comms and can communicate. What's the business problem that we're trying to solve here? Why should you even listen to the conversation that I'm having with you about authentication or wallets or this or that? So I think that IDPro could serve more people and the core people that are in the community already by looking to what are those different flavors of identity professionals in a little bit of the business of identity, in addition to and complementary to the technical layer, which I think is really well represented in our org today. So how can we kind of build out those other persona? And maybe they're here already, and I just love to see them put their hands up, and so we can kind of take note and make sure that we're representing those different flavors of identity professionals. So that's just a little thinking on my side.
So I love some of the ideas you've got there. I think I'll start with strengths and I'm going to give you feedback real time. I think the Slack is, hands down the number one reason that I always recommend IDPro to people is go on Slack. You'll find tons of helpful people. For the most part, the identity community is not sitting on knowledge and thinking of it as a competitive advantage. Now, yes, we have vendors and stuff like that. I get that part of it. But for the most part, most people are in this together. And so having a place where you can ask like literally any question about identity and get answers back from real identity people is hands down to me, that's worth the membership fee per year. The body of knowledge is great for sure. I don't want to underestimate the challenge of trying to curate all that. And I think this is where Heather and her, I think she has a library background, right? Is, definitely helps out with that kind of stuff. But that's stuff that has to be kept evergreen, because the question, on the survey is, well, do you consider yourself, an expert in IAM, or, when do you think you're comfortable with it? Is, I don't think anyone ever really is. You might be good at one part of identity, but there is so much more to it. And so I love to hear the things like getting into what I call like the business of IAM. And this is why we asked this question to lead off most shows. I didn't ask you today, how did you get into identity? I've already asked you that. Go back, listen to episode 290 for people who want to know that story. But there are so many different ways that you can get into identity, and it doesn't have to be technical. And there is so much value that non-technical identity people, or IAM people, or whatever we're going to calling ourselves, bring to the table, that you do need to be well-rounded. And so I love to hear things around, let's talk about project management of identity. Let's talk about program management. Let's talk about, how do you get a CISO to give you the budget? How do you, if you're a CISO, how do you get the board or other parts of the executive organization to get the budget to do things? Because there are so many IAM heroes that run around in organizations, and it's like sheer will is how they operate. And that is not sustainable. So you kind of need to think about how you keep that going. And so I love to hear the ideas around, tackling not just standards and specs, which are very important, crucial, right, to make things go. And so I love to hear those ideas. And I guess I don't know what it manifests as. Is it, conversations? Is it webinars? Is it, a document of the body of knowledge? It's like, hey, here's how I was able to get funding to invest in an IGA platform or privilege access or whatever it may be. I don't know. Do you have thoughts kind of around how that might look, like the business of IAM?
Yeah, I mean, it's great questions, right? And I feel like we made the open call for feedback. So level 1, any feedback you want, send it in.
I will have
Slack,
your LinkedIn will be in our show notes so people can bombard
carrier
you.
pigeon, message in a bottle, skywriting airplane. Level 2, extra gold stars. Bring an example of your idea. Bring it could be, I think that we're missing X, and if we maybe consider doing Y, that might be a way at it. So gold stars if you bring in a recommendation with your feedback. That's always great and appreciated. To get at your question, and as you were talking, I was just thinking I feel like again, this conversation is complementary to and building out, in addition to the standard, the contextualization of standards and of technical specs and that side of the house. What if we had it's a massive effort to curate and write. So thank you, Heather. Thank you all the authors who have made those contributions. What if we also had a bit like an arm of the Bach that was on successful case studies? That started with business problems and worked their way through in 3 pages at most. Here's the problem, here's the case that was made and to whom, here's a little bit of the key takeaways that happened, and then here was the result, and here's the success story. So a repository of case studies of business problems, how they were addressed. Business problem, case studies, success stories. Don't let me name it. Those are too many words in that, but I feel like somewhere in there is a different branch on the tree of the body of knowledge, perhaps.
I like that idea because I think we learn from each other, and that's something we've tried to do with this podcast. Is look, we interview a ton of people, all the time, and we're always learning what worked for them. And sometimes it's just important to find out what didn't work for them, right?
Absolutely.
People are struggling with the same problems or similar problems. And, not everyone is 100%, like you're going to find the 100% solution. But if we can get people 50% of the way there, or 60 or 70 or 80% of the way through sharing knowledge, whether it's this or, a document or something like that, it's like, oh, okay, here's an issue. I hadn't thought about that specific use case or that specific benefit or that specific challenge. I think that would be super cool to kind of have an area where people are willing to share that. Now, that does require people to share working and maybe even not working, maybe there's a list of things that don't try this because here's why you're going to have a bad time. Like we can protect each other from going down a path that has already been traveled and is, let's say, the odds of success are unlikely. If you go down that route, why not share that, that do not do this as much as we should say do this types of things.
Yeah, 100%. The do this, the do not do this. And then also, I always have to check myself, being for someone who's, been doing this in different roles and different lenses for 25 years. Sometimes I have to check myself to say, okay, I've seen somebody try to solve it this way 10 times and I've seen it fail 10 times. And in those 10 times, there might have been different reasons or the same reasons why it failed. But at the same time, I always check myself to say, look, something might have changed. Then on the 11th time, the conditions are different. And now this might be able to go through. And I think that's totally fine. And when I talk with people, I say like, look, just so you know, this failed 10 times. Here's the different reasons. Maybe it'll work the 11th, so I think we have to be open to that too. It's bringing in those different opportunities to learn. And, sometimes, even like sometimes when I use ChatGPT, sometimes it gives me things that I say, okay, yeah, that makes sense right away. Sometimes it gives me things that are outlandish. But even when it does that, I'm like, oh no, I don't want that, but I want something different than that. And it helps to clarify the thing that I'm looking for. So yeah, I think that having a structure where we have a very lightweight and still valuable way to capture these stories in a readable, digestible way. Yeah. Love these ideas. So these are all the kinds of things, you coined it on the business of identity. I think that's a great angle to look at it through. And, not only helping us when we're dealing with beneficiaries or clients who would be maybe, buying these services or using these services, but also as professionals within an organization. Yeah. How are we getting the budget to do the stuff that we need to do? And how can we team up more? Let's say I'm an engineer. How do I team up with the marketing team or the product team? Or, it's fascinating. I was speaking with somebody else and they said, yeah, the thing is, well, first of all, I talked to somebody and they said, we're not investing in identity. And I was like, okay, we just spent an hour talking about fighting fraud and complying with AML. And so I'm not sure how you're not investing in identity. And then, I was kind of having a conversation after that. And a person was telling me, yeah, the people in fraud, their view is we just fight the fraud. That's it. And then the people who report the fraud are the AML people. So they're just focused on reporting it. The other group is focused on fighting it. And the two are not always talking to each other or not even often talking to each other. So yeah, how can we help to get at that, both for how we're dealing with clients or customers or beneficiaries, and to how we're navigating these topics within our own organizations and working within our own organizations. I believe there's a lot of value in that for identity professionals as we look at how does this industry evolve in the context of the way technology and everything is evolving as a whole.
I feel like sometimes IAM is a little bit of Game of Thrones or West Wing or whatever other political drama that you want to throw in there, because politics plays such a big part in identity. And I don't know if enough people kind of recognize that. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, I'm just doing my thing. And why is politics involved? Hey, it is. And I don't mean, world politics, although sometimes that is. But I'm thinking more just within the organization of how do I get things done sometimes it's kingdom building, sometimes it's other things, it's personalities, it's, things like that. And you have to know how, you may not be able to fix it, but you need to be aware of it. Yeah. If you can, chances are you're probably not going to fix it by yourself. But if you can be aware of it, just think how far along you'll be in addressing some of the problems or getting the buy-in, support, or whatever it may be. So, that's another area that I think, and I'm not smart enough to be the one to get into it in detail, but the politics is a real thing when it comes to identity. Yeah,
and on that topic or that lens or that flavor a little bit, something else that I've been spending time sort of similar, just really trying to take stock of this industry as a whole and build out some insights around it, and what is the next chapter to 2030 look like, year 2030 from here. And something else that I've been thinking a lot about is sometimes I think what I'm going to talk about is building bridges, because when you were talking about kingdom building and whatnot, it triggered building bridges. Because the other thing that I'm kind of seeing and looking at is, I think some audiences, and maybe just humans in general, but some audiences really kind of either they want to, or just from design, it's like they want to flatten the topic. Identity is this, or credentials are very flat, like credentials. Here's the thing, it's called credentials. Okay. But at the same time, a credential for a person has a much different set of requirements regarding privacy, regarding where it needs to be used, its utility, and all those. Like, there's so many different constraints around a person credential versus, let's say, you've got a credential for a product and a supply chain. And that credential needs a lot of transparency because it's subject to audit and other types of, across the supply chain. And it needs a lot of international interoperability. So I'm even kind of thinking about, when we talk about trying to work on language around interoperability, looking at using credentials as an example, thinking there's people credentials, business credentials, supply chain credentials, all these different kinds of credentials that have very different requirements, and then also layering a lens of something else, which is local. So your credential at home, how does that work for you? What are the needs there? Versus a national credential, and kind of what's the lens there and what does that need to do? Versus an international credential, because I think that in the context, now to come back to your point, in the context of politics, there is a kind of a story over time of kingdom building. Okay, we've built a kingdom around SAML. SAML's terrible. Okay, fine. Now we've kind of reinvented that kingdom, but with OpenID, but it's a lot easier, but it has its own bucket of challenges, and whether you love OAuth or don't. So standards become kingdom building. And what I'm trying to look at is, where are the areas where, how can we as an ecosystem support pockets of interoperability and innovation? Maybe that's local, national, international. Maybe that's industry based. And then where and how can we build bridges of trust across those pockets of interoperability? But anyway, that all sort of feeds back. I think it's like similar patterns to, you're an engineer, you're a marketing person, you're an executive. It's getting these groups of people, understanding what motivates each of these groups of people, and then finding ways for those groups to put their strengths into the middle. So anyway, that's another thing I'm spending time thinking about recently.
So I feel like this is starting to bleed over into a little bit of more of your day job. And then I didn't introduce you as such, but you're also the president of DIACC, or the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. Did I get that right?
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
You got it.
Acronyms are hard sometimes. Are some of those conversations that you're having in that professional capacity bleeding over into some of the things that you see IDPro needs to start to think about or tackle or challenge?
I would say yes. Yes, I think that when I look at the space for identity, and then even when you say IAM, you kind of start to mean a certain thing, or CIAM, you start to mean a certain thing. But the space around this industry for identity, I think there are a lot of common challenges and opportunities that play themselves out. And then kind of where is what are the different inflection points in different jurisdictions, or what are the different inflection points in different industries? And so, yes, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is, Canada is a collection of governments, 13 provinces and territories, and then the 14th government being the federal government. And we have this, basically when you come to Canada, people will kind of say, it's small enough to get all the people in the same room to make decisions to make them happen, which sounds great in theory. It still takes work to make that happen. And, there is a little bit of a different context where, in the US, where where it's so distributed with 50 states and then 50 state CIOs and kind of all that. I don't know how you wrap your arms around that size and shape of distributed governance. But yeah, kind of in Canada, that's something that's really pronounced is that these different levels and these different layers. And what I'm trying to work to do through our organization is take a very, neutral is one word, but I think informed and neutral at the same time, look at, okay, the work that's happening, there are provincial, let's say, because I'm in a province, there are local needs and there are local requirements in a province that you're in, and with local industries that might be trading nationally and might be trading internationally. And then there are, largely identity is a provincial issue in Canada, unless you're dealing in something that's nationally regulated like finance. So, you've got those three layers, and I've been trying to think about what are some strategic avenues or strategic principles that say, look, there is a case for local innovation, there is a case for national innovation, and there is a case for international innovation, and recognizing how each of these pockets of interoperability, how they can be supported in their individual context, and then at the same time, how bridges can be built across. And that's where, I think it's really, again, business problem first, but if you look at something like wallets, sorry, I know we're all wallet overloaded, but if you look at a wallet as a tool, if you start with a business problem like labor mobility, and you say, okay, how could a credential and potentially wallets help with labor mobility? And then you kind of get into the engineering layer, and then I'm like, oh, cool. So there's a trust fabric in the EU side and the EU DUI ecosystem. And by the way, there's not one European wallet either. So they're having similar playouts in Europe. But where I'm really fascinated is when you kind of have a set of interoperability opportunities in one jurisdiction or one industry, and then you want to bridge that into another industry. And for bonus points, when they're on different technology stacks, how can you build the bridge across? And it has to technically work, that bridge, but really it's what matters. And I'm sorry, I'll be biased here. What matters to me is the trust, like the verification. I'm glad you have a W3C credential, verifiable credential. But if I don't know the processes that went into it and that the data is verified and I trust that data, then it doesn't matter how technically well formed it is. So anyway, that kind of stuff, like bridging between those communities, I think is something very interesting for Canada. But I would also say a universal story for that we should all be paying, attention to and invested in.
I think you hit on the key thing that I always struggle with when it comes to wallets. And look, you brought it up, so I'm going to get into wallets a little bit, but okay. is that trust? And, I think about it from, the US point of view, and this is where I'm based, and different countries around the world have their own points of view. But I feel like at any given point, trust is probably the biggest thing to overcome, because who do you trust? What do you trust? Do you trust the federal government? Well, at any given point in the US, 50% of the population does and 50% doesn't, right? And that flips every so often.
That's right.
And then you get into like a more of like and that's curve like maybe like a macro kind of view. And then you get to the micro view, which is local. Mm-hmm. Can I get a mobile driver's license here in North Carolina? No. Can I do it in Arizona or California? Yes. How do we start to get the micros, right? The micro in the grand scheme of things to start talking to them? And do you trust, again, do you trust your local government versus not? Do you trust banks or finance institutions? Do you trust education? My concern with this whole wallet concept is we end up with so many different wallets. And so now we've just replaced an account, an ID, and a password or some other identity with, oh, that's in my this wallet versus this is in my other wallet. And then what? You end up with what? The one wallet to rule them all? That is social IDP, which is supposed to be sort of like that idea of like one account, right? To do single sign-on with. But the trust is such a big thing. Like I don't know how we get past that realistically. I'm going to assume the technical underpinnings there, does it comply to standards? Is it, comply with federal regulations or whatever it may be? Like those are non-negotiables. Like it has to be there. Like it's not a viable solution if it doesn't do that. But how do you get people onto this is such an interesting part. And, for people who didn't listen to it, we had a great episode we did a few weeks back while we were at EIC in Germany with Christina and Torsten, who are on the German side of Sprint working on EUDI. And, they had a lot of really interesting things to say because I don't know how this works around the world. And the one thing that I wasn't aware of is there's an actual financial repercussion for EU member states if they don't get this done.
Mhm.
And so there is actually a financial motive, which tends to drive compliance. And so I wonder if that's something that, I don't know if that exists in Canada. I don't think it exists in the US, but is that is that the appropriate whip and or carrot that needs to be out there to say, look, we just have to get this done? And I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's always carrots and sticks, right? And I guess on the topic of wallets, this is where and Heather Flanagan did some awesome writing on kind of governance and distributed models recently that I thought hit the nail on the head, because something that I've been thinking about a lot is, in terms of the pattern, you have centralized systems, and then, there's a push to decentralization that has its benefits. But what often happens in those very decentralized ecosystems is that quite often some kind of intermediary needs to step in order to secure the security, bring the control, bring the trust, I know I'm being really recursive there, but often you need some kind of intermediary when you want to start doing high value exchanges or high value transactions. So I'm like, is it just the nature? Because if everything is a disambiguated wallet for everything that you do, now you've just recreated the password problem, and this is great. Okay, fine. But I think there's also there's hard questions as well, or hard positions to be taken or work to be taken. I mean, I also try to separate my thoughts on big tech governance at the political level, at the government level, and kind of their role there. At the same time, people already have platform wallets in their phones. And so what's going to be different or better? And, being clear with citizens or residents about why they can or cannot put a credential inside of a platform, of a big platform wallet, because I think you have to ask, if you wanted the most adoption, then going the path of the big platforms is the one that's going to get you there. Does that have global repercussions in terms of security and national security? Like, hard questions to answer, right? And we can see pockets of states in the US, in the AMBA ecosystem that have gone that way. Look, I don't run a country, but if my driver's license came to me, I don't run a province or a country or any of those things. But if my driver's license had a button and said you could put this in your Apple Wallet, I would do that. I would do that immediately, but that's me, right? And I'm not saying everybody should do that. And the other thing, to your point though, is that everyone has and should have their own anchors of trust. And so I might feel that I've made decisions. I'm in this Apple ecosystem. I have confidence in that. That's fine for me. Someone else might say, oh no, I only want to put my credentials in a government wallet because I trust the government. The next person might say, I only trust the bank. And the next person could say, I trust absolutely nobody. And someone in there is going to trust their university wallet. So there's going to be an edgy person in there that has a university wallet that they want to trust. Anyway, point being is, the trust anchors are really different for everyone. And so how can this kind of comes back to why I'm really spending a lot of time thinking about building bridges, more connection, and less the very, very distributed ecosystem. My own view, there has to be some elements of centralization or connection or bridging to make these tools work and not kind of recreate the problem over and over again. Fun things to noodle on.
This is just how we spend our Monday nights. This is why I like doing this podcast, because I'm not going to claim to have all the answers. I need a little gym, but we can wonder out loud. And so this idea of, is it the wallet? And I'm with you. If I had an opportunity to do a digital identity and put it into my Apple Wallet or Google Wallet, or maybe I would do it too. Mm-hmm. The problem becomes not everyone else is doing it. And so I still have to carry around the physical ID with me, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, hopefully before I die, we will have a solution to that where I can go to the TSA and get on my plane and, Is
Yeah.
this an airport that does it? Is this an airport that doesn't do it? Right. Or
Mhm.
whatever vendor that might be. And so I think it's important that we put those questions out there, and, even if we don't have the answers, let's talk about it, because
Yeah.
again, we can't fix what we don't know about. We can't, maybe somebody has already solved this and they're like, oh, I have a solution for this. Great. Bring it to the
Yeah.
table. Let's pick holes into it and see
Yeah.
if it actually stands up, because that's how things get stronger. And I think it also needs to be a product that people want to use. I mean, let's be honest, digital identity is not sexy, no matter how much I try to make it. It's a product, and like anything else, how do you build a wallet product that people actually want to use? That means they have to trust it. It means, the security has to be there. It means the usability has to be there. That means it has to be interoperable with everything. All that stuff needs to come together, and hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, 100% has to be delightful. Like even more than just, it has to work, number one. Number two, it has to be something you go, oh boy, that was easier than what I did before. Like, there has to be some benefit out of using these tools. And I guess the other thing here as well, and we're a little bit into it here, but there's also the MDL as a whole, and the ability perhaps to phone home or not. Much of what we're doing in Federation is already phoning home, so I think we've got challenges in that space. However, I question or wonder, certainly I do not support I do not support phoning home, especially if there's a capability where they're able to kind of turn that feature on and you don't know about it, and then it's happening in the background. Absolutely not.
Talk about violating trust. I mean, that would do it right there.
No, that's not right. Now, that said, I think it's a complicated issue. Nothing should be turned on in the back without you knowing it, which I think is already happening with lots of services that I use today all the time. But that said, the other piece of that is there are times when I do want audit trail, and I do want traceability, and so sometimes that's okay. And that's something that I really do want, especially if it's something of value that I'm exchanging. And then the other piece of that too is, like, on this phone home in the spec issue, sometimes I wonder if we collectively, if there's sort of a bit of a kicking the can down the line, because my own view is that a lot of the challenges that we are working through within this ecosystem, and I'll talk about the personal identity lens for a moment, does come down to governments and government's obligations, and what our ability to control data about us is within government. And so, for example, if governments have had regulation and it was auditable, and they said, no, we cannot turn this on, and this is regulated, and here's how it's audited, and we prove that to you, then I feel, like a lot better about it if I have that, if that's regulated, right? At the same time, similar to that, I'm looking, we're almost at open banking in Canada. We're going to get there one day. We're not there yet, but we're almost at open banking. And Canada sometimes likes to do this thing where they will rename things. That's something else. So in Canada, open banking is officially, I believe, called consumer directed finance, which is great. I don't know why we need to rename things and complicate it, but it's called consumer directed finance. But that's open banking. But I almost look at if the banks are being regulated to do open banking / consumer directed finance, I look at that and I see the other window, which is, okay, well, there's a piece of data about me in our tax authority called my verified income. Then government should be citizen directed government data. I should be able, as a citizen, to tell the tax authority, I need this data wrapped up, lock and key, immutable, and I need that shared with my bank. We could talk all day about if that happens in a wallet or a network or how that happens, but that linkage of citizen-directed data, I feel like that is part of a missing piece of accountability in a lot of these. I feel like it's hard for us to tech our way out of something that is a governance issue that also needs to be governed. But that's probably because I'm not an engineer. I just hang around with them.
You know, just enough to be dangerous is the way I like to put it. It's like, all right, I can talk a good game, but don't savvy sit down and write code. You do not want that.
No. So, but I that said, you know, these are complicated landscapes, right? And that's why we have to have conversations like this, and to kind of bring full circle. That's why we need to bring these different windows and these different persona into the discussions that we have in this thing called identity, which is very, very vibrant. Tech, governance, comms, product, the whole deal.
Yeah, I think this is, and maybe this is my final point, and circling it back to IDPro, is I'd love to see more international kind of conversations taking place, because look, I only know what's going on in the US because this is where I live and work and spend, 99% of my time. But I feel like if we're able to have conversations with our friends in the EU or Australia or other parts of the world, right? Canada, Denmark, I don't know, Antarctica, right? You name it. There's probably similar questions, and some of them might not have been answered. Some of them might have been answered, but I think that it also helps, if you're really thinking of identity as a career, is be well-rounded and understand what else is going on in the world. I think this is an opportunity maybe where, and I don't know if this is like different Slack channels, and maybe they already exist and I just haven't dug into that, that deep enough, but, maybe it's information that how does Germany do this versus how does France do this? And maybe they're similar, but there's differences because of local, regulations or whatever it may be, or maybe just local cultural requirements, right? That are different, things like that. I think that's another area that I'd like to see more, because I learned a lot when I went to EIC. My first time in Germany, my first time at EIC, was a fantastic conference, highly recommended. And I learned a lot hearing, what our friends in the EU are doing and beyond around some of the challenges that they're facing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. And I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, 100%. Those lenses of information sharing. First of all, I love EIC as well. I would love to be there every year. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That said, I love to be there, and I'm happy for everyone who's there on the years that I can't go. So I'm so glad that you went. You got to see that lens of that conference. It's a wonderful conference. Love to be there. I think of those folks as a part of a family. That said, yeah, you'll see a lean in, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. You'll see different leans in on different industries. You'll see different leans in on different issues. I was having another conversation with somebody else this morning, and they asked me about kind of how much the role of AI and fraud is kind of showing up in our space. And we were talking a little bit about NHI and kind of that space. And and I said, oh, well, what's been happening in Canada is because the fraud has been so bad, it's called FinTrack. This is our basically our KYC AML regulatory body who is responsible for those regulations. Because the fraud has been so bad, they've been adding more and more reporting entities into that into those entities that are responsible to report underneath that regulation. So while I could say yes, AI is there and a lot of focus, at the same time we're kind of sometimes at a different place in the runway where we're leaning in so heavy into the finance regulations and how they expand. And we find now that we've got audiences where we're educating and working with loan officers at dealerships because there's tons of fraud there. And I heard somebody else say, fraud's like water. You put up a dam one spot and then the water just goes around and finds the other spot, right? So while we're having sometimes very privileged conversations about NHI and all the wonky things on wallets and governance and all that, and in the global lens, at the same time, within my work at the DIACC, I'm also dealing with, how do we help educate loan officers at auto dealerships? And how can lawyers verify the identity of their clients because they're now, responsible as well, and things like title insurance and all the fraud that's happening in the real estate space as well. So you've got to look at, we as a community have to look at both the we have to do the yoga of the big transformational issues and the geopolitical and internal political and all that, and those issues. And at the same time, there are people every day out on the front lines in the economy who are getting frauded, and there are people who are suffering from those frauds. And then you say, well, we need to also make sure that those people get the immediate solutions, which might be the photo ID captures and the document comparatives and kind of those layers. And so I really think it's for us as a community and us in IDPro and all these different lenses, and I heard somebody else talk about a new standard replacing another. And the thing is, these capabilities all hang around. It's rarely like a 1-0 to 1-1-0 switch. And we're kind of stepping our way through. And so we as an industry have to kind of look at the whole chain for how do we help the person today with the stuff today, and then leaning into the national work, the international work, the AI layers. This is why it's a fun industry though, right? I mean, there's so many different layers to look at it through. So
this is why you can't ever really be a truly an expert, is because it's always something new, or it's either something new, right? Like AI is kind of the thing right now, and NHI, right, is all that stuff, or it's something really old. We still have mainframes, and they still need to be secure, and they're still running billion-dollar organizations off of mainframes.
100%. It's a great example. I love that example. And by the way, since it's been said 3 times, maybe 4, if you are the person who took the skills survey and you said you are an expert, I would love to speak with you. I want to hear more about you and what you do, because I'm sure on the bell curve, there's a lot of people that don't feel expert yet, but I'm sure there's some people who said they are expert, and I'd love to hear their stories too.
Maybe that's like the next like IDPro game show or something like that, where it's like, defend your thesis, defend why you think you're an expert, and then people just try to throw stuff at you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, the identity. Yeah, the identity group. We're a fun snarky bunch. So, but we'll welcome. You're all everybody's welcome.
It is a great community, and we're glad to have you be part of it, Joni, and glad to see you, take on the role of chair here for us. I like to end shows on a lighter note, and we were kind of kicking around ideas before we hit record, and to pull back the curtain, I usually come up with sort of a stupid question or something at the end to kind of lighten the mood, because we do get kind of sometimes heavy, right, in identities. Like, let's bring back up to the surface. And you mentioned that you have a new addition to your family, and you have a puppy of some sort. And people most likely are going to listen to this, and if they stuck around this long, you guys are the true heroes and people who drive this show. But tell us about your new puppy.
Amazing. So yeah, if you made it for the bonus part of the episode, congratulations. Thank you for being a rock star. So the last few weeks of our lives have been taken up with something wonderful, which is a new puppy, a new addition. So just to kind of draw the circle, we had a German Shepherd Husky mix that made it almost to 17 years old, and he went over the Rainbow Bridge in November last year. So we were super, super blessed. Kind of took a moment, took a pause. We said, let's take a pause, and maybe the next dog will be like a very calm dog, and like coming off of a Shepherd Husky mix. So we ended up adopting a 8-week-old puppy on the 4th of July. He's a 4th of July baby boy. And he is very, very boring, very lazy. He's a German Shepherd Rottweiler, so no excitement is going to happen there. Just going to be lying around. No, he's a ball of energy. And this is wonderful, because it's look, I love dogs. The dogs are the best people. Sorry. Cats are great people too. Don't come at me, Heather.
No, I have this is a hill you and I can die on. Dogs are absolutely the best people, 100%.
Well, I heard a podcast, and actually they were saying that, don't quote me, but I think dogs had been were with us and domesticated for over 40,000 years, whereas the evidence on cats is 10,000 years, which seemed to lead into why there are so many different breeds of dogs, because they've had that 40,000 years, but also why cats are kind of quasi-domesticated. Like, yeah, they're with us, but they're not there to serve us necessarily. So
you're there to serve them.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So no, this is keeping us out of the off of the news channels, off of the doom scrolling. The whole feed is puppies in training and all of that, which I'll take that any day. That's a wonderful thing to be distracted by, especially over the summer.
So I'm always happy to see pets. They're always welcome on the show. do we want to introduce? First of all, I don't think we mentioned his or her name.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to do like a quick, not the Jeopardy song, but
Yeah.
Something like that? Okay.
So I'm with you. I know you can hear me. You're on headphones. You probably won't be able to talk as well. But yeah. So we had a dog. We have 2 dogs now. We had a third one. Ours crossed the Rainbow Bridge in December, which kind of sucks. And she was also a 4th of July adoption for us. So I have 2 dogs of my own. I have a 10-year-old Beagle Hound mix, and then his name is Duncan. And then I have Archie, who is a foster fail who wakes up with violence in his mind. Oh my gosh. Get that dog on camera right now.
Hi, Champ. Okay, for the people who are listening, this dog looks a bit like a Rottweiler, but he's a Rottie Shepherd. He's a Shepweiler, and he's got the eyebrows, and he's black and rust, and he's just the sweetest boy ever. He's a sweetie. That's a good
looking boy you got there.
He's the first time he's been on a podcast. You're a star, Champ. His name is
won't
Champ.
Be the last time, I'm sure. So Champ is the man for sure. It looks like he's just waking up from a nap Champ.
There. He is. You know what? I thought he was in the crate for the whole podcast episode, and I came out and he's lying on the floor, and we still have couches, which is wonderful. So,
that is
did good.
I remember, crate training and doing all that stuff with, our dogs, and I spent the entire month of July in Chicago on my front door steps, just with a leash. And all right, Duncan, are you ready? Let's go. And I took off, I think, 2 weeks from work to be like, it was like my PTO for the year was like, okay, I guess we're getting a dog. And that was it.
I know what you mean, though. They get in that phase where you're like, let's walk. And they stare at you. You're like, no, let's do dog things. It does not compute. That's what we're doing now. But it's wonderful. Oh, thank you for kisses.
Oh, he's giving you kisses. Yeah. So this is, no offense to the rest of our conversation, but this has been the best part of the entire show. So I would encourage people, go on the YouTube channel. We'll have the video here and you can see Champ and Joni. And so this is
we need identity dogs. Sign your pets up. Your pets can join IDPro too, as long as they have credit cards. You're welcome.
Well, they have mom and dad's credit cards. That's how typically that works.
There you go. Sounds good. Oh, that wasn't official advice from the IDPro board chair, or maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, you better be careful what you put out there now that you have this specific mantle and scepter that you are in charge of now.
They're just not verified IDPros. That's okay.
See, it all came back to trusts, and now we can't do that anymore. Okay. All right. Thanks, well, Joni, Jeff. I'm going to let you get on with your evening. And Champ, it's great to meet you. Welcome to the identity community, Champ. And I guess you as well, Joni.
Thanks.
Always great having conversations with you. I'll have links in our show notes for people to check out. So, your LinkedIn profile, again, feedback. Joni has said, bring it. So let's bring it.
Please.
Be respectful, obviously, of course, but bring solutions too. Like, bring those ideas. Like, nobody wants to be like, oh, this sucks. Okay, great. Like, what are your ideas to fix it? Or do you have ways, bring solutions if you can as part of it. I think that's always very helpful to say, okay, hey, here's some ideas I had on it. So I totally recommend that. And like and subscribe to all that fun stuff. And Jim and I will keep bringing you episodes as we always do every week. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with y'all in the next one.
Thanks so much. See ya.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.